Hey everyone, this is Heidi. Welcome back to My Reading Life. And today I'm here to film a book tag. This is the presidential book tag. The original tag was created by Brian at Bookish, and he tagged me to do this. So I been wanting to do this for a couple of weeks and just haven't sat myself down to do it. I actually wrote the prompts down here on this piece of paper, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at my prompts. So let's just get to it, shall we? Because this is a fun tag, especially right now, since we're in the month of November still, and the presidential election is still being contested. Let's not even go there. Okay, question 1 is George Washington, the first book that you remember reading by yourself with no help from anyone. So, the book was a old-fashioned reader, like the kind from turn of the century where, you know, it was a textbook that was used in school and there were fables or whatever inside the book, and it was used for like reading instruction. It was my grandfather's reader. I didn't read the whole book, or at least I didn't read the whole book at the beginning when I first figured out how to read by myself. But I did memorize and read by myself on my own The Milkmaid and Her Pail, the fable, The Milkmaid and Her Pail. And I actually remember doing this before I started school. Like, I would bug my mother to tell me whatever the words were that I didn't know until I had the entire thing memorized and I could read it on my own. So that's the first thing I remember reading all on my own without anybody sort of reading it to me. Question 2, John Adams, a book that is short but disproportionately powerful. And for that, I've picked this slim little piece of nonfiction. It's an essay, The Battle for Paradise, Puerto Rico Takes on the Disaster Capitalist by Naomi Klein. I read this last year. No, it was this year. It was the beginning of this year. It was in January, end of January, I read this. And it's just a short little essay, and it's all about the impact of Hurricane Maria and how there are basically two forces sort of pulling at each other for the economy and the livelihoods of the people of Puerto Rico. And one side are sort of the capitalist system pushed on the island by the government of the U.S., and the other side is the actual people of Puerto Rico who are trying to build a sort of sustainable, decentralized economy. I thought this was very, very good. Question 3, Thomas Jefferson, a book that I like written by a very bad person. So very bad is probably, you know, maybe a little bit of a strong of a term, but I picked Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich. I read this book probably 20 years ago when it first came out. I don't remember exactly when this came out, but whenever this book first came out, I read it. And then I picked this copy up at a used bookstore not very long ago because I really got a lot out of it. But since that time, Barbara Ehrenreich has written some very racist tweets online. And so now that I reflect back on this book, Nickel and Dimed, it is a little disturbing to have a white woman sort of going into these, what she does in this book is she takes on jobs that are traditionally held by very poor people and minorities, like a housekeeper at a hotel. She works as a maid through a maid service, and a nursing home aide in like Walmart or something like that. So a bunch of these different minimum wage type jobs, and tries to live on that wage. And it is quite eye-opening what it's like to try to live on minimum wage. But I think that it is also very white in its gaze and its application. So, and now that I know that Barbara Ehrenreich has racist inclinations, it makes me really not want to read anything else by her, which is sad because I think this book was good. But not interested in reading books by people who want to get online and just spout their racist crap all over the place. Question 4, Theodore Roosevelt, a book that has more energy than you do. So I couldn't resist picking a book about Theodore Roosevelt for this prompt. This is The River of Doubt by Candace Millard, and this is Theodore Roosevelt's Darkest Journey. This is a book all about Theodore Roosevelt traveling down what's the word I want? A tributary of the Amazon. This was an unmapped tributary of the Amazon. He undertook this expedition after he was president, and it was quite an adventure, and it was way more difficult than they had anticipated, and it definitely required more energy than I have right now. And I just want to say, I forgot to say at the top of this, at the beginning of this, I am going to be answering all these prompts with nonfiction answers in honor of Nonfiction November. Question 5, a book that fundamentally changed my conception of reading. And I realized I had to reach over there for this book. This is Braiding Sweetgrass, and I was struggling to come up with an answer for this one, and then on page 52, let me pull up the quote. This page is she's talking about trying to learn her native language, which was Potawatomi, and so she's trying to learn this native language. She is descended from Potawatomis, and she's having such a hard time learning this. It's really, really difficult to her. Ridiculous, I ranted in my head. There is no reason to make it so complicated. No wonder no one speaks it. A cumbersome language, impossible to learn, and more than that, it's all wrong. A bay is most definitely a person, place, or a thing, a noun and not a verb. I was ready to give up. I'd learned a few words, done my duty to the language that was taken from my grandfather. Oh, the ghosts of the missionaries in the boarding schools must have been rubbing their hands in glee at my frustration. She's going to surrender, they said. And then I swear I heard the zap of synapses firing. An electric current sizzled down my arm and through my finger and practically scorched the page where that one word lay. In that moment, I could smell the water of the bay, watch it rock against the shore, and hear it sift into the sand. A bay is a noun only if the water is dead. When bay is a noun, it is defined by humans, trapped between its shores and contained by the word. But the verb wikwigama, to be a bay, releases the water from bondage and lets it live. To be a bay holds the wonder that, for this moment, the living water has decided to shelter itself between these shores, conversing with cedar roots and a flock of baby mergansers. So this really changed my concept of words, right? Like the idea that a word that we take for granted, like bay, a body of water, that we consider a noun, but that in this indigenous language can be a verb, to be a bay, to acknowledge the living nature of everything around us and not just human beings, and not to think about everything in relation to me as a human. That really blew my mind and changed my concept of reading. So that was amazing. This book is amazing. I know I keep talking about it, but it truly is. Question 6, John Kennedy, the most glamorous it book you've ever read. And for this, I am going to say Becoming by Michelle Obama. Obviously, everybody, when that book came out, everybody was talking about it. Everybody was reading it. I listened to it on audiobook. It is a fabulous, fabulous memoir. It's read by Michelle Obama herself. I would highly recommend it. And it is one of the best-selling memoirs of all time. So I think it definitely qualifies as an it book. Question 7, Gerald Ford. Have you ever read a placeholder book, something that only served to get you from one book to another? And for this, I'm going to say these presidential series books, these are small little biographies about each of the presidents that are put out by the Times. It's put out by Henry Holt, I think, is the publisher. Henry Holt and Company, and it's called Times Books, and it's the American President series. And they're just these little tiny biographies. And really, to me, these serve only as placeholders and a method to sort of get you into the topic, and they're not definitive biographies by any means. They're like introductory biographies. So they're great for that purpose, but they're not going to give you that in-depth information that you may want. So that's why I think they serve to get you from like starting place with a president and then on to something a bit more substantial, hopefully, if there has been a biography written about the particular president that you're trying to read about. Question 8, Bill Clinton, a reading experience you loved despite how utterly sinful it was. This was really hard to pick a nonfiction book for this prompt, but I ended up picking The Turkish Lover by Esmeralda Santiago, which I read last month. And this is the third book in her memoir trilogy. And the reason why I picked this for a sinful type of a book is because our main, the author of these memoirs, Esmeralda Santiago, is having her first adult relationship. She's living in sin with her boyfriend, whom she never marries. He's a much older man than her. She's in her early 20s and he's in his 40s. And her mother does not approve, her family does not approve, and she takes off with this guy anyway and lives with him. So in the eyes of her family, she was living in sin, but I don't particularly consider it sinful at all. But she was a product of her times in the 50s and 60s. And, she was dealing with that level of, people feeling they had the right to comment on her sexual and romantic relationships. Question 9, George W. Bush, the most harmful book you've ever read. I think the most personally harmful book that I've ever read is Fast Food Nation. This book, I read this book years ago, decades ago now, and I still cannot eat sausage because of this book. Warning, if you read Fast Food Nation, you will be put off French fries, fast food French fries, and you will probably not be able to eat sausage ever again. I certainly have not been able to. And lots of you out there are vegetarian, I know, and so you would say that's probably a good thing, Heidi. But it was a very, very disturbing book. That's all I can say. And then question 10, Barack Obama, the last great book you read, flaws and all. Well, this is a book, the last great book that I read, and I don't think it has any flaws. Cast The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. I think you would be hard-pressed to find any flaws in this book whatsoever. This book is tremendous and brilliant, and I would highly, highly encourage all of you to read it. And I'm just going to bang on about it until you do, so you might as well read it right now. Okay, so the end of this is to tag people, and I'm going to tag 3 folks or 3 channels because one of these channels is 2 people. So I tag Book Zealots because I know that you guys read presidential biographies and biographies in general, and Britta Bowler and Kim from Middle of the Book March. I would very much like to hear any of your answers to these questions. Thank you again to Brian from Bookish for tagging me. I think this was a very awesome tag, and I really had a good time putting my answers together for it. I hope you are all doing well and finding some good books to read. I will talk to you later.